In our last lesson, we covered the basics of exponents, and now we're going to dive into the laws of exponents. These rules will help you simplify expressions and make working with exponents much easier. By the end of this lesson, you'll know how to apply the product rule, the quotient rule, and the power rule to simplify problems like x squared times x cubed, or x to the fourth power divided by x squared. Now let's get started. First up, let's talk about the product rule. The product rule tells us how to handle exponents when multiplying terms that have the same base. So let's say you have x squared times x cubed. What does this mean? It's x squared multiplied by x cubed. Now with the product rule, when you're multiplying terms with the same base, you add the exponents together. Here's the rule in action. So we simply add 2 and 3 together to get x to the fifth power. That's it. Pretty straightforward, right? The product rule just says when you multiply like bases, add the exponents. Now let's move on to the quotient rule, which is used when you're dividing terms with the same base. Here's an example. How do we simplify this? The quotient rule tells us that when we're dividing two terms with the same base, we subtract the exponents. So we subtract the exponent in the denominator from the exponent in the numerator. Here's how it works. So 4 minus 2 equals 2, and we get x squared. With the quotient rule, it's simple. When dividing terms with the same base, you subtract the exponents. Now let's move on to the power rule. The power rule is a bit different. This rule comes into play when you have an exponent raised to another exponent. For example, let's look at, with the power rule, you multiply the exponents. So instead of, you multiply 2 and 3 together. That's x to the sixth power. So the power rule tells us that when you raise a power to another power, you multiply the exponents. Let's practice each of these rules with a few more examples to make sure everything's clear. We're multiplying, so we apply the product rule. We add the exponents. Nice job. Now let's do one with the quotient rule. Let's simplify. We're dividing, so we use the quotient rule. Subtract the exponents. Easy, right? Now let's finish with a power rule example. Here we have, apply the power rule and multiply the exponents. Great. Now that we've seen how these laws work, let's quickly recap what we've learned. 1. The product rule. When multiplying terms with the same base, add the exponents. Example. 2. The quotient rule. When dividing terms with the same base, subtract the exponents. Example. 3. The power rule. When raising a power to another power, multiply the exponents. Example. These 3 rules will make working with exponents much easier. Now you can simplify expressions much faster by applying the product, quotient, and power rules. The next lesson will take a deeper look at how to apply these rules in more complex problems, but for now, make sure to practice what we've learned today. The more you practice, the easier it'll become. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next lesson.